Hello and welcome again to News Express, exclusively brought to you by Business AM, Nigeria's fastest growing financial and business newspaper. I am Chukunonsu Modi. Interesting stories we have hitting the front page this week. Let's take a look. Now, the big story, danger ahead. Experts warn macroeconomic instability looms for Nigeria. Sub-headlines, if revenue fails to match rising debt cost. Another sub-headline, total borrowing now 7 trillion naira, DMO okays more. Analysts project 45 trillion naira public debt for 2022 and federal debt service to revenue almost 1 trillion naira. Second headline, Nigerian banks not in EM caught for IMF's global bank stress test. Sub-headline, CBN confident banks stable despite headwinds. You should look out for finance and investment with firms sweat shareholders' funds. Check out commodities and agriculture as well with the story, Nigeria's forgotten solid minerals, a must read. Transport business too as well, Meccano's Geely game changer. Definitely look out for executive knowledge series with putting COVID-19 testing to the test and visionary voices with fixing our failing. Now let us bring in Philip Isakba, the publisher Business AM, to help us make sense of the headlines. Good morning, Philip.
Good morning, Onso. It's good to be back. I hope your weekend was good.
Yes, my weekend was good. How was yours as well?
Splendid.
Okay, so let's go to the big story. Now, this one in particular, there has been one thing or the other to worry about lately, Mr. Philip. I mean, last week we talked about analysts worrying about the deepening uncertainties like, tariff hikes, rising prices, and even election uncertainties that have surrounded the Nigerian economy and how it is affecting the investment climate. I particularly remember the headline saying ambushed, in fact. Now, today's headline, we're seeing danger ahead with experts warning, with the Nigeria's debt service costs putting severe pressure on the post carrying its revenue, which has continued to dwindle. We are going from one issue to the other, Mr. Philip. What's happening?
Absolutely. I mean, it's good that the warnings are coming from the experts on the economy, so to speak, and the good thing is that we are heading towards an election year, and then these warnings are coming up. It gives members of the public, a good place to start from in terms of what you need to be putting these people jostling for positions to test on. First of all, you have security issues, which is something that is mind-blowing, given what's been going on in the country, all over the country, not just in the northwest, northeast, but also down in the south, especially southeast, So there's quite a lot that is unfolding, I mean, the warning signs have been there for quite a long time. It's just that as we head towards 2023, analysts are coming out and beginning to pinpoint specifics, in terms of what's going on and how the danger lies ahead. What they are talking about with regards to this story is the fact that the debt costs, it's on the very high side. You are spending over. I mean, I think at one point they said we were spending 94 to 98% of revenue on just maintaining. Maintaining the debt. So that is it's what you call remarkable. In terms of how negative it is. Given what the country is going through. So ahead of 2023, there's quite a lot, that the incoming government will have to contend with.
Yes,
and one
definitely.
of them is that borrowing has shot through the roof. Total borrowing now at 7 trillion naira.
That's nuts.
There's a projection of 45 trillion public debt, for what's it called 2022. The Debt Management Office is saying that it's okay to borrow more, but what you have is that the incoming government will have all these things to grapple with. It's not just the security issues, because if once the storm is calm, if security is taken care of, you are confronted by the economics,
Yes.
because we keep saying that what you have two issues, One is you have the politics and then you have the economy, So any government coming in, whether it is the federal government or central government or the local states or local government, once the elections are over, you have to deal with the economy of the federal, state, or local, in terms of how you generate enough income, to deliver on the promises that you're going to make. So Nigeria, there's quite a lot with regards to this. Macroeconomic instability is looming, the analysts are saying, and this has been well captured in this story. Especially because there are so many things, that are just in the way. You have external reserves that are below $40 billion in a year that you are supposed to be that is supposed to be rising. With regards to crude oil prices rising in the global commodities market, but it is not happening like that for Nigeria. You have exchange rate problems. The dollar. The Naira keeps weakening against the dollar on such a remarkable level that so many people are worried, what's going on,
Yes.
And then you have the fact that there isn't enough forex, for an import-dependent economy, to service the different areas of the economy, whether manufacturing, whether services, or what have you, and then you have the oil theft that is going on, in the Niger Delta, where they talk about 3 billion naira being lost to oil theft alone in 2021. And for this year alone, the NNPC, in one of the stories inside, you see that the NNPC has come up to say that we have lost 1.5 billion already in the first quarter, So in 3 months, the country has lost with regards to oil theft, 1.5 billion. If we did 3 billion last year, you can imagine what we're going to do this year with regards to that. So many things are in the way, for economic recovery. And the government is going out borrowing as if the world, the world will never, almost like the world is running out of what to do. So, and then there isn't quite enough policy responses coming out from the government for us to understand exactly where they are taking the country to, with regards to the economy. And so this is what is really disturbing and worrying to many analysts that we've spoken to for this story.
Yes, honestly, Mr. Philip, it's baffling because, like you said, we have so many indices that are showing an economy that is worse for wear. We are not making as much revenue, and yet we are still borrowing. Having a total of 7 trillion naira, and the DMO is still okaying for more. It's not funny, but at the same time, it's funny. Now, I want to know, what exactly is the challenge? Is it because of the fact that Nigeria has failed? And we use failed because, we've had chances to, diversify our revenue sources aside using crude, but then we still bank on crude. So is it just because we have failed to, diversify our revenue sources and we're still looking towards crude, or there's something more? I know you mentioned policymakers are also not putting structures in place, but what else? What's the challenge?
So the challenge is all over the place. You have competency issues. You have people drilling down to what the problems are in terms of, and then once you drill down to the problems and you're very certain about what the issues are, then you begin to churn out policies to address them. One of the stories that you read out talked about solid minerals. We spoke about this last week or 2 weeks ago, and then we talked about how that is a cash cow that hasn't been scratched in terms of policy addressing it. And you talk about revenue is the key. Revenue has been a major challenge. But there's also the problem of a squandering of riches. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes,
it was Onyekonwenu that I think there was a song or a documentary.
Yes.
Long time ago, a squandering of riches that she did for Newsweek or whatever, and she had a Newsweek program. So you have a cost with regards to running of government, where the what's it called, the National Assembly isn't flinching at all with regards to how much that is going down the drain in that sector. In that aspect of government, and so it is with several other areas. And then you don't have the what they call psychological assurances, in terms of just words, in terms of policy. People who are in charge of policies coming out to reassure people, reassure investors, because you need money to come into the system, whether domestic investment or foreign investment. You need money pumped into the system, into the economy, and you need to give assurances to people, through policy measures. I think that is a major challenge, because revenues aren't coming. Almost like there's a dead end, with regards to I've been thinking of the policy addressing this particular whatever is going on. So many things that government needs to get its hands on. Unfortunately, it's a pre-election year. So many people are jostling for offices.
Yes.
for especially for the office of the president, and then attention has been
Mr.
diverted.
Phillips, sorry to cut you short on this, but really, so many people have been jostling for presidency. As at last year, we were just saying Tinubu won the president. Now, so many people just coming out wanting to be president. It's funny.
It is funny, but everybody has their chance. Everybody has to take their chance. But the point is not. The issues are so quite clear. You have the economy again. We talk about insecurity in the land. And it is something that voters really will need to drill down to. In terms of asking the right questions and looking at who is providing the real solutions that the Nigeria needs. It's not. You wouldn't just say the Nigerian economy, or you wouldn't say the Nigerian social fabric. You would say Nigeria as a whole needs. So the good thing is that there is enough evidence or enough material, to drill down those who are coming out. Especially with regards to the economy, it's so surprising. You talk about diversification, you talk about electricity supply, you talk about, a simple matter as fuel, supply. Refineries state-owned refineries are doing nothing or producing nothing. And you've spent quite a lot of money, $20 billion, out of for crude oil, for petroleum product importation, and that is enormous for an economy that is bleeding, and at least if you were running a system and you saw a place where there is a huge leak, you probably will spend more time patching up that leak to ensure that it doesn't continue to leak and waste your resources, but when we talk about reserves, if you talk about foreign exchange going out of the country, the major leak, is importation of petroleum products. And if you can't deal with that elephant in the room for so many years, then you don't mean well for the country. That is the plain truth. And the economy bleeds in so many ways. You can't. The port with regards, we're not talking about just port in terms of importation. We're talking about exports of commodities. The little that you can, non-oil commodities that you can export, you find that it is a big challenge, a major challenge for people to get through the ports, to export commodities. So many areas. If you can't deal with that in the number of years, if you can't deal with that in one term, you can't deal with that in two terms, and then you don't speak to the real challenge that you face with regards to why that is a very difficult project for you, then there's something not adding up. And this is why the economy is in a serious trouble.
Yes. Speaking of dealing now, I know, is there a possible remedy? Because, Mr. Philip, with what we're seeing here, analysts are seeing the debt stock rise further to 50 trillion naira in the wake of this forthcoming general election. And they're also expecting to trend upward following a budget deficit of 6.4 trillion naira for 2022. This is a lot. I know that I know we've set some solutions, meaning that the government should look further, but what exactly should they do? I know borrowing is one thing we need to stop. Well, how?
No, borrowing in itself is not a bad thing. Every economic analyst or whatever, looking at the issue will tell you. But what do you borrow for? If you borrow to consume, then you attract for yourself a tragedy, that will keep you in such a prolonged state of despair. So if you borrow to produce, then you produce for the economy and you keep the wheel of the economy going. But what it seems has happened is that, what seems to be happening is that a lot of the borrowing, you show a budget. For instance, let's say there's a budget deficit, quite all right, and so you are borrowing to plug the budget deficit, But guess what? If you look at the budget in its entirety, you find that it is maybe 70-80% recurrent, if not more, and so if it is 70-80, or even at some point 90% recurrent, then you are borrowing to feed or to consume, and that will not take you anywhere, So, but if they were borrowing, if they were borrowing, and then they had a good plan, to recoup from what they have they spent on, the borrowings on, then you'll find that it wouldn't really matter, because you say you borrow for this and people are using it, and the thing is generating money, enough money to then pay back the debt. It's nobody's concerned about that. But you borrow, and then you are in a state where you then get into trouble, because one, you are not even dealing with enough capital projects to be able to generate more money, and that is a no, in terms of economic management, of managing the economy, and that is a big challenge. It's difficult to say how do you get out of it, because maybe not for this government, maybe for the next government, because it's in its tailwind, and there's nothing. There's no magic that can be done anyway, They've had this present government has had 7 years, entering its last year to next month or so, and it's just coasting home, so to speak, tidying up a few things and wait for the next government to carry the cans.
All right, Mr. Philip, hopefully let's see what happens within this year. I pray we don't get up to 50 trillion that analysts have projected. Moving to the second headline, Nigerian banks not in EM caught for IMF's global bank stress test. Now, Nigerian banks have failed to make the cut of a sampling list of Africa's all emerging markets banks used by the International Monetary Fund to carry out a global bank stress test for the purpose of assessing systemic risk in world banking. First of all, what is this stress test about, Mr. Philip?
Well, following the COVID-19 incidents, the global economy was in serious turmoil, and then you had a lot of crises, supply chain difficulties, that brought so many economies down, and particularly manufacturing, across the world. Nothing was going on. What this meant, was that given that the banking system across the world is a link, for economic growth, or whatever, the financial system in any part of the world is what helps a lot of things to happen in the economy. The IMF thought it wise, to check out what exactly the situation was with the banking system, the impact that the COVID-19 had on them. So the stress tests, covering a number of banks, across the world, were just to find out how resilient they are, how much this had affected them, their balance sheet, and their performance across the world. But this story is basically telling us that when this test was carried out, the IMF took a number of countries across the world, 257 of the largest lenders from across 24 advanced economies and 5 emerging markets, and that this group accounts for 70% of the world's banking assets, but it's just to draw attention to the fact that the banking system, even though it's a major part of the Nigerian economy, for Africa's largest economy by GDP numbers, and the largest country in terms of population, that when they were listing the banks that needed to assess, that no Nigerian bank made the cut. There were banks from South Africa. For Africa's largest, it simply means that the banking system, the banks, they have some way to go, because they still need to show up their assets, in such a way that they become recognized, for this kind of analysis or a test that the IMF carried out. I think the major thing really is the comforting thing, I would say, is that when CBN carried out its own test, it did carry out its own test, and I would take, from that it was driven by the fact the IMF doing this global test, and Nigeria not being Nigerian banks not being part of it, that the CBN also carried out its own test to see how resilient the banking system is, and they had come out at the time, to say that things were okay, that they're confident that the banks are stable, despite all the headwinds that were thrown at them. So basically, that's what the story is about. Nothing. The result of the test this showed that there were a lot of challenges in emerging markets. Of course, Nigerian banks, like we said, were not no Nigerian bank was among the ones stress tested, but looking at there were some concerns, that were expressed with regards to emerging market banks, and then, for instance, the IMF said, considering the significant uncertainty about the evolution of global outlook, the exercise also presents the result of a severe adverse scenario going further into the tail of the distribution of global macro-financial outcomes. Those are economics stuff they're talking about there. Okay. But it did recognize the fact that emerging markets situation in emerging market needs a tightening or looking into, compared to the advanced economies.
Okay.
But the good thing is that the central bank did come up to say that when it conducted its own, that where things were okay, that nothing to worry about, that they were stable and they could weather the storm.
Okay. Yes, I agree that they said there's nothing to worry about. But then the stress test they conducted actually said that there was a sharp drop in oil prices, which was resulting from the pandemic, reduced global demand for Nigeria's oil products, a decline in government revenue, and then the others. So with this test that they've carried out, is there really nothing to worry about?
Again, because the way the banking system works, they sometimes they are leveraged on a lot of things. For instance, you remember some time ago, it's a few years ago, when you had oil prices, because the banks were leveraged on oil companies in terms of what they had provided. We could also maybe look back a bit, to the days of import, what you call fuel importation, Amanda, where everybody was involved in it, okay. and the banks were widely exposed to those what's called oil importers, and they suffered quite a lot, and then you had these current electricity issues when the power companies were sold, and some banks were also exposed in that direction. So the key thing is that all those things, all those negatives that have been mentioned, you have the banks exposed to some of these negatives, and you will have that affecting them one way or the other. But what they have done is that they have looked at the numbers. They have stress tested the banks, and the CBN has come up to say, that despite those headwinds, that they were still in a good place, and that's perhaps reassuring. We should take the word of the central bank, the regulator, to mean, and we haven't had any crisis anyway, since that time. So we want to believe that even though the coast might not be clear, you will still expect that caution will be the word.
Okay. All right. Let's believe what the CBN has said, and hope that there won't be any other issues. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Philip. We'll definitely see how the stories develop this week.
Thank you, Nonso. Have a great week.
You too. That was Philip Isapa, the publisher of Business AM, Nigeria's fastest growing financial and business newspaper. That's all for now. Stay tuned for more.